पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतस्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदे गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः. Good evening and welcome all of you. We are resuming this series of classes on the Bhagavad Gita after the long summer recess, and hopefully we'll be able to hold these classes in person maybe sometime next month or the beginning of the next up, maybe the month of November or the end of October. There's a plan. So I think we were discussing the 11th verse before we concluded on the 9th chapter. And the 11th verse says, Apajananti mamudha manushim tanumasidam parambhava majananto mama bhudam maheshwaram. So the simple implication is, Lord Krishna says, there are those who look upon the Lord as just a human being who was born sometime as the son of his parents, Devaki and Vasudeva, historically. That's what Bhagavad says. Lord Krishna was born as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki. So, our understanding, our concept of God very often depends upon our own spiritual evolution, our own spiritual growth. I mean, our idea of the highest reality, the concept of God depends upon the evolution of the seeker, the spiritual aspirant. So, in this context, we must emphasize the fact that nobody is wrong. We can't say those who look upon God in a particular way, in a particular fashion, as a human being, an anthropomorphic being, is wrong on somebody who looks upon God as, let us say, according to Advaita, an all-pervading spiritual divine reality is right. It's not like that. It's not that one idea is wrong or another idea is right. One idea is right according to that particular person. Here, belief or doctrine or dogma is not the deciding factor. It's our spiritual evolution that's a deciding factor. This is a very important aspect in Hindu monotheism. You have to remember, if you look at the Vedic literature, there are different views of God. One may be puzzled, especially from the standpoint of Christianity, Islam, and the Abrahamic traditions. God has got a specific function, a specific definition, and there are some very important principles used to understand and define God. So, it's not that one person understands God one way and he is right, and another person understands in another way, he is also right. That is not acceptable to the Abrahamic theological tradition. But in Hinduism, you find there is no view that is wrong. This may appear to be very, very puzzling, very strange, really. You find in Vivekananda literature, there is a statement which may appear to be very shocking, It's better it's better that if every person in this world has his own religion, his own God. So let's think of it, 7 billion people inhabiting this planet Earth and 7 billion religions, 7 billion gods and goddesses. Is it conceivable? Logically, it is cognizable? Now, whether we agree with it as a doctrine or not, that is the reality. Look upon Christ. See, Christ was looked upon by a great mystic, let's say a highly evolved, spiritually evolved mystic. He has one understanding of Christianity or the teachings of Jesus Christ. He will interpret the Sermon on the Mount in his own way. It will be a very exalted way. Now, on the other hand, somebody who may not be mystic, but he just believes in something and he doesn't ask further question. So far as he is concerned, what is stated in a book, that is okay for him. And now, this varies from spiritual seeker to spiritual seeker. In a way, it is true that all of us have got our own gods and goddesses, our own religions. This is a reality. Because 7 billion people, let's say maybe 2 billion people in one religion may believe in that particular religion if you take the certificate, the document, but these 2 billion people may understand the highest teachings of that particular religious tradition in 2 billion different ways, depending upon his own or her own spiritual evolution. See, when I interpret the Sermon on the Mount, I have my own interpretation. I may look upon it as a great document of the highest spiritual philosophy coming from a great saint. But a person may be a non-baptized, a non-Christian. He also may find some great spiritual teaching in that doctrine. And another person a baptized person may find his own doctrine, his own understanding he may have. So it varies from spiritual seeker to spiritual seeker. What does it mean? The same God idea, the same religious tradition approached, interpreted and experienced in so many different ways depending upon and according to the individual's own spiritual evolution. So that is why in Hinduism, from a Vedantic perspective, there is no religion that is wrong. There is no religion that is right and wrong, because you can say this is right means that should be wrong, the others should be wrong. Every religion represents, every idea of the highest reality represents the particular person's own spiritual evolution. And as we evolve further and further, we understand, that's what Vedanta tells you, what Gita tells you. Eventually, at the highest level, you understand God is one divine reality, present everywhere, present in everything, present in everyone. That person will be able to see the whole creation in God and God the entire creation. This is the highest experience in Vedanta. Ye yathamam prapadyante tam sadaiva bhajamiham mama varma anuvartante manushya partha sarvasaka. Gita says, Lord Krishna we already discussed that particular verse. Everyone follows his own or her own path. One way, it could be narrow lane, it could be a royal highway, but still it is his own or her own path. Whether they are aware of it or not, whether it's a direct route or indirect route, every person is eventually approaching me, because when we are sincere, when we are honest, when we are pure in our heart, when we have compassion for everyone, when we are unselfish, whether we are aware of it or not, we are approaching God, we are going towards God. That is the central philosophy in the verses that we already discussed earlier, up to 11th verse of the 9th chapter. In this particular chapter, that's what I'm talking about. So, after explaining this, in the 12th and 13th mantras, Lord Krishna is discussing the temperaments of different spiritual seekers according to their temperaments. The 12th verse is Moghasha Moghakarmano Moghajnana Vichetasaha Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Pragridim Mohinim Sitaha. A particular kind of temperament is discussed here. It's called asuri-sampat. Rakshasi-sampat, asuri-sampat. Asuri-sampat, let us say people, in modern language we can say people with a lot of negativity, confused and ready to confuse others, a natural tendency to do the wrong thing, a natural attitude to create problems for others and also problem for themselves. You might have heard of these three gunas which constitute human temperament. Sattva guna, Rajo guna, Tamo guna. These are three guna. Guna means temperaments which express in our attitudes, our approach to life, the way we act, the way we think, the way we speak. All these are defined and influenced by this particular temperament, which is called guna. And these gunas are threefold: Sattva guna, Rajo guna and Tamo guna. Sattva guna is the highest and most sublime, the most ideal temperament. Now, I can explain this by describing a typical person endowed with the Sattva guna. Wise, intelligent, balanced, with a sense of self-restraint, but not inactive or insensitive, but a natural tendency to live a good, ideal life that gives him contentment and that gives others satisfaction and happiness. This is the nature of a person endowed with Sattva guna. Wise, intelligent, active, but self-restrained. Activity with self-restraint. And wisdom, proper discerning wisdom. These are the characteristics of a person endowed with Sattva guna. Rajo guna, active, enthusiastic, efficient, but not always self-restrained. He may be unrestrained, active, but unrestrained, oversensitive. These are the characteristics of a person. Ambitious. These are the characteristics of a person endowed with Rajo guna. Tamo guna, the characteristics are laziness, sleepishness, ignorance, self-deception, delusion, wrong ideas. Many of the delusions actually belong to this category. Delusions of grandeur, delusions of reference, delusions of persecution, and also melancholic nature. All these are characteristics of Tamo guna. These are three human temperaments. There is nobody in the world who may not have a little bit of any of these three characteristics. There cannot be anybody in the world who has got only one characteristic. It is impossible for anyone to live in this world endowed with only one characteristic. I am reminded of, I frequently mentioned this earlier, but there is no better example, so I am quoting this. Dostoevsky's The Idiot is a classic example of trying to fictionalize an ideal person who is a totality of all good qualities. As Dostoevsky understood, he writes that his plan was to describe a Christ-like figure, and according to him, submissive, gullible, to a to a very disturbing extent. It was a problem for him. Easily deluded by others, easily taken for a ride by others, may appear to be foolish, but he was not foolish. So he was trying to put together a fictitious, imaginary combination of all imaginable good quality. If a person is truthful, to the point of gullible, innocent, can be taken for a ride by everyone, active, but anyone can deceive him. His name is Prince Minskin in Dostoevsky's The Idiot. Actually, it was a failure, and the character actually, the novel opens with Prince Minskin returning from a lunatic asylum, and it ends with his going back to lunatic asylum because he could not live in this world. So there cannot be anybody in the world with only Sattva Guna. See, that's it. Dharma, the highest spiritual quality, it cannot float in the air, To function and to be able to practice it, you need intelligence, you need both your hands, you need common sense. So, for example, a very truthful person, a very innocent person, he should have some strong point. He should be able to see through the games played by others. He should be good, but he should not be too good to be a problem for himself. Maybe to be to an extent that it becomes a problem for himself and it becomes a problem for others around him. So what's the use of that kind of goodness? It shows that Sattva Guna alone cannot exist in one human being. Rajoguna also cannot exist in one human being. Always active, you become an automaton, a machine. Tamoguna also cannot exist exclusively without the combination of other gunas. So every human temperament is a combination, one way or other, of all these three human temperaments. Now there is one particular type of people. It's called, and their characteristics or their temperament is called asuri-sampat. Means characteristics of asuras and rakshasas. Rakshasim, asurim, two adjectives are used here. Natural to rakshasas and asuras. The conventional meaning is they were demonic people, evil-doers. In ancient times, in mythological books, you find these demons are portrayed maybe 1,000 feet tall, maybe Ravana was a demon with 10 heads, and all these mythological stories you find. We are not concentrating on that aspect. We are concentrating on the temperament aspect. So those who have, let's say, a combination of Rajoguna and Tamoguna and no Sattva Guna, such people were called asuras, people with demoniacal nature, with negativity or evil nature. A lot of activity, but action is guided by evil motive, delusion, ignorance, and tamoguna. So Rajoguna dominated by tamoguna is the characteristic of this asuri-sampat people, people with evil characteristics. There is a long list that we are going to discuss in future. The other group is mentioned in the 13th verse. Mahatmanastu mampartha daivim pragrudimasidaha bhajanti ananya manasu jnatva bhudadim avvayam. Then, in total contrast to people with this demoniacal nature, there are those who are high-souled, noble-hearted persons. And that temperament is called Devi-sampat, divine attributes, you may call it. Dominated by Sattva Guna, but there will be some Rajoguna, but there will be almost no Tamoguna. People very active, but very noble. Their action is guided by a noble motive. So they are active, but they are self-restrained. They are not insensitive. They are efficient, enthusiastic, active, but at the same time, they are capable of restraining themselves. They are capable of practicing their action with a contemplative element. So action and contemplation, but the contemplative nature dominating, the action is subservient. That is evil-sampat. The contemplative nature is zero. Activity is there, but the dominating temperament is tamoguna, ignorance, delusions, or a natural aptitude for doing the wrong things. That is asuri-sampat. So these are two temperaments explained here. Now this is explained in a much more elaborate language in the 16th chapter. Who are people endowed with Rajoguna, Sattva-guna, Tamoguna? Who are those endowed with the asuri-sampat, the demoniacal nature? And there are who are those who are endowed with the divine attributes, evil-sampat. So these are described in the 16th chapter. In the 16th chapter actually is devoted to a discussion on this subject. This will help us. In many ways, it will help us to understand our own mind. Once we understand the forces working within our own mind, we will be able to correct and improve our own attitudes. We may not require any help from others. We will be able to analyze our own mind, our own temperaments, our own characteristics. So, the 16th chapter, it actually is devoted to these divine and devilish or demoniacal characteristics or temperaments. There are 18 evil or negative traits mentioned in the 16th chapter. To give a list: vanity, arrogance, pretension, anger, cruelty, ignorance, impurity, lack of discipline, no attitude towards dharma or religious values, no truthfulness, no faith in God, a strong desire all the time driving our actions and feelings, delusion, false values, worry, greed, egoism. All these are some of the characteristics of this asuri-sampat. Let us say, for example, one important characteristic of such people is, they will be very unsatisfied, always discontented. A total absence of the 10 gunas or disciplines, values mentioned in the Yoga Sutra. Yamas and niyamas. Ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, shauja, santosha, tapaswadhyaya, isvapanidhana. Non-violence, truthfulness, purity, contentment, a sense of devotion for higher values. All these values are totally absent among these people. So they are called people endowed with negative characteristics called asuri-sampat. So 18 characteristics are mentioned here. Beginning with the second verse, ahimsa, satyam, krodha, shanti, krodtyaga, shanti, ravaishunam, daya, bhuteshu, alaluptam, madhavam, hri, rajabalam. These are the characteristics of evil-sampat. It goes on explaining up to the third verse, Tejakshama dhriti saujam adroko nadimanida bhavanti sampadam devim abhijadasya bharata. People endowed with non-injury, that is ahimsa, truthfulness, renunciation, tranquility, absence of a tendency to spread rumors, compassion to everyone, uncovetousness, gentleness, modesty, absence of fickleness, fearlessness, purity, steadfastness to knowledge, and then again forgiveness, boldness, fortitude, all these characteristics. So you find, interestingly, you find all the noble virtues, what we normally call spiritual qualities, are listed. But along with that, there are certain qualities also mentioned. For example, fortitude, determination, boldness. Then again, the ability to use a discerning wisdom in action, in thought and word, in your interaction with others. So all these are also necessary to protect our good qualities. We may have a lot of good qualities, but we should also be able to protect our good qualities from being hijacked by others. Otherwise, if a person tries to practice, I'm giving the example, I can't give a better example, maybe in the whole history of world literature. The best example I can give is Prince Menskin. And an example, Mahabharata gives Yudhishthira. But Yudhishthira was a great philosopher. He also shares some characteristics of Prince Menskin, but he was not an uneducated, he was a great philosopher. But he had also his weak point. Weak point means he could be easily taken for a ride. So you may have all good qualities, truthfulness, non-violence, purity, you stand for certain values, but you also have strength, determination. Then only you will be able to practice those good values. Otherwise, your goodness will be a big problem for others around you. That is another problem. So goodness, to be really good, should be allied to strength, inner strength, spiritual strength, fortitude, boldness, all these qualities. This is called Devi-sampat. Asuri-sampat, of course, there is a long description. I don't want to give too much of importance to that. Dambho, darpo, abhimanascha, krodha, parushamevaja, ajnanam, cha abhiyadasya, partha, sampadam, asuri, ostentation, arrogance, self-conceit, anger, and so on. I already desire, delusions, false values, and again when worry. Worry is included here. Why should an evil man be worried? Because he can never be happy. That's what Gita tells. So, the purpose of introducing this subject, which is going to be discussed elaborately in the 16th chapter, why it is introduced in the 9th chapter, for a simple purpose. Lord Krishna wants to clearly make us understand the true meaning of spirituality. Because spirituality needs all the sattvic qualities, and sattvic qualities include not only goodness but also inner strength, strength of conviction, strength of boldness of conviction, and the ability and willingness and the strength and determination to practice and implement the high values that we believe in, that we uphold, and not just philosophically be convinced about those values, but the ability and the willingness and the strength to defend those values and to implement those values. That's the reason why, according to the great commentators, Mahabharata has got hundreds of characters. Hundreds of dynasties are described. And there are great philosophers. Vidura, Karna, Bhishma, Yudhishthira, Kripacharya, Dronacharya. They were great philosophers, saintly figures. But the author of Mahabharata, remember, more than 100,000 verses, Vyasa wants to drive home the idea that good qualities are not enough. Each of these great characters have one Achilles heel, one weak point. Bhishma was the grandsire, but he could not bring himself to act in need of the hour. Yudhishthira was also endowed with all good qualities, but he could not. He was not enthusiastic enough. He did not have the boldness to take a decision and go ahead in upholding his values. But Lord Krishna, on the other hand, he had all the great qualities. At the same time, he had the strength to implement those qualities. So that's why, according to the commentators, in the whole Mahabharata, there is only one perfect character. As far as it is possible for an embodied being to be perfect, that is Lord Krishna. So now, after explaining these two verses, which have got a lot of implications, the verse is Mokhasha Mokha Karmanaha Mokha Jnana Vichetasaha. The terms are used here. Here, of course, the author is not describing elaborately all these demoniacal or devilish characteristics and good characteristics. After mentioning this, it's a brief description. Those who have got a lot of vain hopes and wrong knowledge, wrong convictions, and whose mind is scattered, always going after the sensory pleasures, empirical enjoyments, without understanding that empirical enjoyments are not eternal. And then they always are driven by some strong but wrong convictions, because they are endowed with these evil attributes. That is 12th verse. 13th verse refers to evil-sampat, the noble characteristics. Mahatmanastu mampatha devim prakritimashidaha, the great souled, the noble-hearted persons, the evil-sampat. They are possessed of these divine attributes. What they do? They know me. They know God. They know me to be the origin of all beings and immutable, and worship me with a single mind. So they have a great devotion to the spiritual values, and they live a life oriented towards the realization of these spiritual values. After saying this in the 14th verse, there is again a description. Now, in the coming 2-3 verses, Lord Krishna says, these great souled persons, people endowed with Daivi characteristics, divine characteristics, they uphold these values, they live in this world, they go through the normal duties and responsibilities, they also enjoy everything, but they also realize that everything in this world is one day bound to disappear. So they are not deluded. They are enlightened enough to understand the momentariness of the transitoriness of everything in this world. That point you can find in the 15th verse. So I shall just refer to that before coming to the 14th verse. Jnana yajnena chapyanye yajanto mam upasade ekatvena pruthatvena bahudha vishwato mukham. These people endowed with divine characteristics, they practice jnana yajna. The word is jnana means knowledge. Yajna actually implies a ritual according to Vedic tradition. When you are giving a lecture on Gita, it is called a discourse on Gita. But suppose you give a lecture on Gita for 7 days, or give 3 lectures a day, or maybe 2 lectures morning and evening for 7 days, or for a number of days consecutively, then that process is sometimes called Gita Yajna. When you, for example, the Bhagavad is a typical devotional classic in Hinduism. when you give a series of lectures for a prolonged period for several days, then it may be called Bhagavad Yajna. So Yajna in the conventional meaning can imply a series of programs related to one particular spiritual topic. But Yajna, in reality, Yajna means any noble act. That's a real definition of the word Yajna. Yajnovai Sreshtatamam Karma. This is the definition given to the word Yajna in one of the ancient Vedic hermeneutical works. It's called Katyayana Vakya Sukta. Means Katyayana was a great writer who was a great Vedic scholar, and he defines this term Yajnovai Sreshtatamam Karma. Karma means action. Sreshtam means noble. An action becomes noble when you perform it without any selfish motive and for the good of others. It becomes Yajna. So Yajna could mean anything that is noble. Jnana Yajna means what? When you devote your whole life to Yajna, to acquiring spiritual knowledge, to realize the truth, spiritual truth, and to practice the spiritual truth in your life, it is called Jnana Yajna. In this context, it implies understanding or realizing the Advaitic concept of unity, the unity and oneness of existence. The realization of Atman as all-pervading and immanent, present in all of us and present everywhere. Realizing that this divine being, divine spirit is present in us, it is present everywhere. This realization and a life lived according to this realization is called Jnana Yajna. So it is related to the non-dualistic system of philosophy. It's called Advaita. So that is Jnana Yajna. Ekatvena Pruthatvena. Pruthaktva means distinction, difference. So Ekatva means one, Advaita, the non-dualistic unity and oneness of existence and reality. Pruthaktva means distinction, difference. Now, there are people who follow the devotional schools of philosophy, who like to understand God as a compassionate creator of the world. They want to pray, they want to worship, they want to pray to God, they want to do ritualistic worship, prayer, modern confession or whatever it is. That is also correct. Nothing wrong in it. So people, according to their temperaments, these people endowed with divine nature, evil-sampat. Sometimes those who are advanced spiritual seekers, they want to live according to this realization of the spiritual unity and oneness of the whole existence. The divine reality, God is present in all of us and everywhere. Jnana Yajna, Ekatvena, the idea of the spiritual unity or one. Ekatva means oneness of existence. And others who don't want to practice non-dualism, they may practice dualistic philosophy. They want to look upon God as a divine, compassionate being. And on a specific day or specific days, they may go and perform ritualistic prayers, confessions or practices like that. So both are following the same spiritual path. So these are the characteristics of people endowed with evil-sampat. In the 14th verse, Lord Krishna says, Sadatam kirtayanto mam yadantascha dridhavrda namasyantascha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. This verse tells you about those who practice this devotional philosophy. So they they sing hymns about God, and they strive to reach God through spiritual discipline, through the practice of spiritual disciplines, meditation, prayers, and so on. And they are very steadfast, and they worship me. So these two paths, either the path of non-dualism, ekatvena, jnana yajna, means by understanding the spiritual oneness of the whole creation, by realizing that God exists not only inside the temple but also outside the temple, accepting the reality that God lives in the temple, and then eventually we evolve further and further. Eventually we start realizing that God is present everywhere, in everything. So real spirituality means implementing or practicing this realization every moment in our life. That is, the divine, God, the divine spirit, is present everywhere. And realizing this, practicing compassion, love, broad-mindedness, all these various qualities towards people around, toward everything, not only human beings, the whole existence, creation. That is jnana yajna. Or, if you don't want that, you can go to a temple or a church or any place of worship on regular days, read scriptures, pray, meditation, no matter. So no specific religion is mentioned here. What is implied here is the fact that as we evolve, as we grow in spiritual life, our idea of God also changes, evolves. At the beginning we may think we can practice spirituality and religion by following certain rituals, reading a book, certain do's and don'ts. That's fine. That is fully accepted. That is fully respected and recognized. But then Lord Krishna says there is one step beyond that. And you reach that step when you realize that God exists not only inside the temple or a place of worship, but also outside. That is, recognizing the presence of the divine everywhere and in everything. So now we will have interaction. Perhaps we are resuming these classes after some interval. Of course, Shankaracharya has something very interesting to say about these people who practice devotion, who are endowed with divine qualities. So he says, Sadadam sarvada bhagavantam brahmasurupam mam kirtayando yadantaha cha indriya upasamhara shama dhamma daya ahimsadi lakshanaha ahimsadi lakshanaihi dharmehi prayadantah. What he says is simple. What he says, if you reach this level of realizing the divine present everywhere and everything, then what do? How do we understand that you have really realized that truth? You start practicing shama, dhamma, etc. Ahimsa means non-violence, self-restraint, self-control. All these qualities become natural to you. That is the hallmark, that is the sign that a person is evolving in spiritual life. So a great commentary is there, which we can discuss in the next session. Most welcome, you are most welcome with questions. Thank you, namaskar. Thank you and welcome. Yeah. Yeah. Very happy to see Mel after a long time. Can you hear me? Eh? Yeah. Yeah.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah. Please.
This is Mark.
Yeah, most welcome.
A lot of times when I'm reading spiritual material, the one thing that I come across quite frequently as to how someone can advance in their spiritual life, the answer that is given is by developing dispassion. But I never really see like what steps or how someone is able to develop dispassion. Could you comment on that?
You mean developing a passion for spirituality or spiritual practice you're talking about?
No, I mean dispassion.
Oh, dispassion. Okay, yeah. Dispassion, yeah. No, in reality, it is easy to practice dispassion. When we look around and we observe what is happening around us and happening in the lives of people, including our own life, we can see all these are fleeting, changing, momentary experiences. Good and bad, happiness and unhappiness, everything is changing. So, what is subject to changes is limited. That's what Vedanta says. So, when we see things changing every day, whatever we accomplish today, we know any day, whatever we accomplish, it can disappear. Health, wealth, everything, friendship, all these are important. All these are valuable, important. But we will be able to enjoy them better when we understand the limitation. Understanding the limitation doesn't reduce their value. Rather, we will become realistic in our understanding of what happens around us. So this understanding is enough to create a kind of dispassion in our mind. We become too passionate about things because we give too much importance, we get obsessed with certain things. And behind that obsession, behind that extreme passionate attachment, there is a wrong idea that those things to which we are attached, we are obsessed with, are everlasting. That is obviously wrong. Whatever we normally value highly in empirical life, wealth, money, health, everything, these are necessary, these are important. We should do everything necessary, everything to make these things to the extent that they are necessary for human life, for supporting our life. Vedanta doesn't tell you to run away from realities of life. Vedanta is actually asking you to make a more realistic estimate of these things, to a much more mature understanding of everything around us. That's what Vedanta tells us. So, once we understand, the natural result will be there is something higher. This higher can be anything, depending upon what we are. Our faith system, if you are agnostics, if you are atheists, then also we can have a value concept, which can be an absolute value concept. Doing good for others naturally gives us a feeling of contentment and satisfaction. You can find even people who don't believe in God doing good things, great things. That's because by doing good things, great things, they derive a kind of inner contentment. That's a very precious spiritual, psychological wealth, this contentment, kind of inner fulfillment. Now, if you want this inner fulfillment, you need to practice dispassion. And inner fulfillment and contentment, that's very important. People lose sleep because they don't have it. The richest man in the world, still that person may not have contentment. He is not able to sleep, he is suffering from anxieties and worries and so on, because of the absence of contentment. So that is something that really makes our life valuable and meaningful, livable. So once we understand this, then even an agnostic, an atheist can practice dispassion. Okay, now as for those who believe in God, it is much more easy. You know why I am giving this broad spectrum of human temperaments? Vedanta is perhaps the only spiritual system that keeps its doors and windows open, even to agnostics and atheists. That's something very interesting. Because Vedanta tells you that even if you don't believe in God, even if you do not accept in God, if you live your life in such a way that God will accept you. There's a very interesting aspect of Vedanta, especially Advaita Vedanta. You can never hear anything like this in any other monotheistic systems of Hinduism or outside. You live your life in such a way that God will accept you even if you do not recognize God or you don't recognize the ontological existence of God. No, just think of it. So the idea of God goes far beyond the received definitions of the God idea. In fact, if I don't want to again refer, I referred many times referred to Meister Eckhart on these sessions. Meister Eckhart's theology of the divine, the indescribability, the non-definability of God, the non-definability of the ultimate reality God. So going beyond the Trinity, you see, when the Trinity, then to name God, define God as God itself is a limitation of the unlimited, the infinite. So you can find many such ideas even within, not in the mainstream, but within the great Dominican priest, German, the 13th century German mystic Meister Eckhart. I have given some talks on this subject, Meister Eckhart, and Shankaracharya's philosophy. Many times in Sunday lectures you find to YouTube, you can see savedanta.org, you can find such lectures for more elaborate information. So, I think Bobby has something to add.
I am interested in, let's see, I'm interested in what you had to say about Prince Mishkin and the idiot, and I'm reminded that Prince Mishkin had epileptic seizures.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
He actually felt that the neurological disorientation helped with visions that he considered priceless, and you mentioned it in the context of the balance of the gunas.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that when the author posits the concept of a completely righteous human being,
Christ-like, as Dostoevsky wrote in his notes, Christ-like. He wanted to create a Christ.
Right. It was in a way his own test of his aspirations in the real world.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to me that as a writer from the Christian Orthodox tradition, testing his own spiritual resolve, that he ends up seeking the kind of balance that you're speaking of, that Vedanta actually teaches, the equilibrium that is lacking in the character. Is that the point that you were trying to make?
Precisely. Because Dostoevsky himself wrote that his plan was to create a character who was as close to Christ as possible. But in my opinion, his understanding of Christ was perhaps lopsided and incomplete. That's what it actually reveals. Because Christ was not a weakling like Prince Minsky. Christ was a very strong person. There was a kind of inner strength, profound spiritual strength in the Christ character, in the real Christ that you come across in the New Testament. He was a man who could rise up to challenges, confront challenges. So, maybe I think it was Dostoevsky who was practically wrong in his assessment of what a Christ-like person should be. So, and he himself admitted, though he liked that novel, he himself admitted that he was not fully satisfied with the outcome. So So that's why great writers, including the Archbishop Rowan Williams, admits in his critical works that it was a failed Christ. So it was failed in the hands of Dostoevsky. That's what I say. So that's be more accurate. Because the real Christ that you come across in the New Testament was a profoundly strong person, spiritually strong. So spiritual strength and spiritual strength and Sattva Guna should be properly understood, should not be misunderstood, should be properly understood. Sattva Guna inherently includes a kind of inner strength, not strength of the muscle, but strength of conviction, strength of the spirit. That's very important. Person endowed with Sattva Guna will have a lot of conviction. I can give the example of Gandhi. I don't think anybody would accuse Gandhi of weakness. You may not agree with his non-violence. There are many even in India who won't perhaps agree. But Gandhi was certainly one of the strongest human beings comparable to Christ and Buddha. One of the strongest human beings who walked on this earth. You can imagine. So what kind of strength did he embody? In fact, that is the real strength of Christ, which Dostoevsky, in his limited understanding, perhaps could not visualize. That's my take on this subject. Yeah. Yeah.
Ram Swamiji, I think you have addressed a question from YouTube already, but I will still ask it. The question is from Nanjuda, and he says, is it right to say that political leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Lincoln had evil-sampat?
Yeah, when we talk about evil-sampat, we should, because it's found in a religious scripture, Gita, and remember, Gita is a great religious classic, but its relevance far exceeds the realm of religion or spirituality. It can be a guidebook. For Gandhi, it was a book that he held in his hands. When he wanted a problem, he read it, and he compared Gita to his mother. Like a mother consoles a child, he admits Gita consoled him. That's what Gandhi himself wrote about it. Now, as for Lincoln, I think he was a true Christian, as far as my understanding goes. He's a real Christian, He was a man of convictions. So, certainly, without a evil-sampat, it's impossible for you to stand for a higher ideal and to sacrifice for that higher ideal. Others may or may not agree with you. In such a situation, you're convinced of the sublimity of the high ideal you're trying to practice, and you are ready to face and confront the challenges. So that's why, one of the characteristics of a person endowed with evil-sampat is it tejakshama dhriti saujam, So actually, the determination, the strength, boldness, integrity, all these are important. To be a good man, to be a good person, you should certainly be bold, because a coward cannot be a good person. It's important. Strength should not be understood in terms of physical strength. Strength of the spirit is different from other manifestations of strength. Yeah.
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah. So thank you very much for, especially I'm grateful to those who ask questions, because I deal with different subjects in these sessions, and sometimes I may not be doing full justice to every topic I discuss. So those who ask questions, they are helping me directly to fill the gaps.
Swamiji, can we check if there are more questions? I feel that people might be wanting to ask more questions.
There is another question I see.
Yeah. Yeah, please. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Swamiji, namaskar.
Yeah, namaskar. Yeah.
For me, Hinduism is not so much about monotheism entirely, but more in reference to the multiple facets of what God represents. and the faces and characteristics in our direct nature, so that neither whether these gods exist or not is relevant to what they mean in reality. Would you say that the difference between Advaita, between duality and non-duality, it is that perception? So you mentioned monotheism, which was interesting to me because Advaita, I never thought of non-duality as being a monotheistic belief so much as God being a part of who we are, and that there's oneness in the universe and everyone is a part of the practice itself, referred to us as children of God, which I perceive to be a representation of non-duality, and maybe misinterpreted as many other religious leaders over thousands of years have been.
Okay, now you asked one question. I want to focus on that question because frequently, the difference between non-dualism or non-duality and duality, that's one, and its relation to monotheism. Okay, now monotheistic traditions can have a non-dualistic reach, especially in its highest and most sublime forms of mysticism. That's a fact. Even all monotheistic religions have an element of non-dualism. So what is non-dualism? Well, there are different approaches, but in this context what it means is, when you evolve in spiritual life, at the beginning you may begin your spiritual journey with formal worship, reading scriptures and rituals. But as you reach and you need a man-made structure, it may be a temple, it may be a church, it may be a superstructure, whatever it is. But the highest level, you reach a point where you reach a level of direct communion with the divine without the help of any intermediary. And at a still higher level, you feel that divine as manifesting in you. Not that you become God, but that divine is present in you. You are able to feel the presence of that divine within you, and you also feel the presence of that divine in other human beings. So you reach a point of oneness, unity. That is implied in this verse. That is one thing. So you can, as I mentioned, if the most monotheistic traditions can have an element of non-dualism. So monotheistic systems, especially the superstructure, the hierarchy may not be non-dualistic. The hierarchy is always dualistic. Dualism means it could mean worshipping more than one absolute reality, but it also means seeing God as distinct and different from you and His creation. God sitting somewhere and His creation totally distinct and different. So when you reach this non-dualistic experience of Advaita, you find the Creator, the divine, is present in the creation. Again, it is not a concept or an idea or a philosophical dogma. It is a matter of inner experience. And that's why I said, at a mystical level, all monotheistic systems will have an element of non-dualism in it. And what is called duality, you mentioned, when you read Indian philosophy, dualism or duality is associated with a philosopher known as Madhvacharya, who was born actually almost 300 years after Shankaracharya. So in Shankaracharya's commentaries, or in Gita is still earlier, there is no reference to this dualistic philosopher Madhvacharya. What is meant here is any concept which emphasizes a distinction between, a permanent distinction between man and God. I mean, man and God means the seeker, man or woman, and God. It's a permanent distinction. That is there in all monotheistic superstructures and hierarchies, but a mystic often can transcend these barriers and reach an experience, again not a philosophical conviction, an experience in which he may or she may feel that the divine that I am worshipping is actually present in me, present everywhere. So that is the highest experience in non-dualism. You can continue the discussion in the coming session. Most welcome. You are most welcome to continue this discussion. Okay. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.